This month, our worship theme is resilience. Last week, we looked at beliefs and thoughts that support our capacity to remain healthy and whole, even as we change and evolve in response to the challenges we face in life. Today, we'll spend some time looking at behaviors. What can we do? What habits and practices might we establish to support resilience? How do we use our body to retrain our brain and vice versa? As a framework, I'm using a book called Surviving Survival, The Art and Science of Resilience by Lawrence Gonzalez. Gonzalez bases the book on interviews with people who have survived extreme trauma. Things like animal attacks, shipwrecks, losing a child. The guy who got trapped, his hand got trapped between the wall of the canyon and a boulder. Right, yeah. These folks, by and large, were able to integrate their experience and use it as a platform for growth. But the techniques they use are accessible to all of us and can help us heal and grow when we're forced to endure difficulties. So today we're going to reflect on why these practices help, think about which practices we might want to adopt, and if you'd like, you can even try out a few. So come, let us worship together. This morning with a little disclaimer. We're going to be talking about the practices that people who've been through unusually severe trauma have used to heal and reinvent themselves. And we'll learn why it's so difficult, the ways our brain architecture and our biochemistry betray us sometimes. And for some of us, all the resilience practices in the world aren't enough to help us find our way back to health and wholeness. PTSD is no joke, and today's sermon is really not directed at people who live with that diagnosis. General information, discipline, spiritual practices, sometimes they just don't do the job, and there is no shame and no stigma associated with PTSD or any other mental health diagnosis. So let's get that clear before we can start, okay? So also, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be sharing abbreviated stories, versions of some of the stories Gonzalez shares in the book, and some of them are pretty rough, so remember to breathe. If you need to take a break, I promise I won't be offended. And as promised, I have some stuff at a table back in the corner with which you can engage in some of the practices I'll be talking about. There are materials there. You can knit, you can make friendship bracelets or beads, you can sketch, you can color, just rip the pages out of the book that's back there, you can write. So, anytime you feel like it, just head on over, help yourselves. So 3 of the stories in the book revolve around animal attacks. A woman named Elaine was swimming on vacation in Mexico when she was attacked by an 8-foot crocodile. Another woman, Mickey, was attacked by a shark while she was scuba diving. And then Patricia and her husband Trevor survived an attack by a grizzly bear. Now, animal attacks are an interesting thing to look at because they hook into our primitive survival systems and create conditioned responses really quickly because, of course, that's what our primitive survival systems evolved to deal with, right? So you remember Pavlov's dog and the way he was trained to salivate at the sound of a bell? So that is a conditioned response. When you have one stimulus and another stimulus and they immediately happen at the same time, once those pathways fire together, they're more likely to fire together in the future. The saying is when they fire together, they wire together. Now, in the case of Pavlov's dogs, it took a number of iterations for that wiring to solidify, but in survival situations, what happens is the link locks into place almost immediately. So that's why people who have come through a traumatic experience have triggers. In Eileen's case, anything associated with the attack or the painful parts of her recovery triggered an intense fear and struggle response and sent her into a full-blown panic attack. For Mickey, Images of sharks sent her into a dissociative state. Meanwhile, Patricia, who had been an avid hiker and outdoors person, completely lost her capacity to walk in the woods. Her brain just associated outside with bear attack. She had a hard time even leaving her home. So, what did these survivors do? What did they find helpful? Eileen had a master's degree in psychology, and what she did was she went back to running. Do we have any runners in the room? Okay, so running. She'd been a runner before the accident. She knew that exercise was a good way to shift her body chemistry. But what's interesting about her choice to run is the attitude she brought to it. In her words, she began to approach her recovery as an athletic event, letting her anger and frustration at the changes to her brain and her body drive her forward. This is called creative aggression, and it's one of the most effective responses to adversity. When crisis hits, we fight back. We get mad, and then we use that anger to fuel our recovery. Running was extremely difficult and painful at first, but Eileen just kept going, demonstrating another thing that we have to do in recovery. We have to trust the process, let go of the outcome, celebrate the very small bits of progress. Having this focus on learning to get back to running allowed her to be an active participant in her own healing. She came to regard what had happened to her as a platform for growth. She still feels, though, that she's different from other people and different from who she was before the attack. Again, as I said last week, resilience isn't about bouncing back. It's about moving on and changing and evolving, allowing ourselves to be transformed. Mickey, the woman who survived the shark attack, showed similar mental toughness. Like Eileen, she understood that she would never be the same, but she couldn't accept these panic attacks, these dissociative episodes, the constant fear. So she actually took a photo her husband had taken of the shark that attacked her just before it attacked, and made it a screensaver on her computer. She did that so she would have to face it every single day. And at first she'd walk in and see the screensaver, see the photograph, and panic. But then she would deliberately calm herself and force herself to look at it while touching into the feelings of gratitude she had for surviving. And in particular for her husband Mike, who was a trauma surgeon, who was able to stabilize and save her after the attack, and then who was supporting her during her emotional recovery. So it took a little while, but after several weeks, when she saw the shark, she associated it with those feelings of gratitude and love instead of danger. Mickey also got back into the saddle quite literally. For most of her life, she associated horseback riding with feelings of joy and strength. So she actually got back on her horse just 2 weeks after the attack. So she's physically having a hard time with this. It took several of her friends to help her get up there, but Gonzalez describes what happened in that moment this way. She sat there on high, she held the reins. Her emotional system intimately knew the saddle as a place where she was in control, was safe, and the world was predictable. She put her body where it had learned to feel good. She put her body where it had learned to feel good, and it obediently felt good. Sometimes we forget that our brains are part of our bodies, not separate from them. The physical practices we engage in impact our mental health, and this is especially true when it comes to trauma. There are several clinical treatments that take advantage of this mind-body connection: EMDR, tapping, TRE, or trauma release exercise, trauma-informed massage, or yoga. I'm not going to go into depth around these because they're the realm of therapies that should be provided by professionals. But it's good to know that they're out there and they can really help. Trevor, the man who survived the bear attack, used 2 more really effective strategies post-trauma: suppression and humor. When the thoughts of the attack intruded, he just chose not to think about it. He got busy. He redirected his attention Kind of like, have you ever babysat for a toddler? Okay, so the toddler, you can see the storm starting to build. What do? You give them a new toy. Or you find a new activity to focus on. So that technique of redirection is really effective in terms of suppression. Then there's humor. When he wanted to go back outside, he told his wife he wasn't afraid and they weren't at risk because, the quote is, "We won't be attacked again, Trish. We're pre-disaster." Laughing, just like deep breathing, tells our brain that we're safe. It releases chemicals that soothe and make us feel good and shifts the balance a little bit in our blood chemistry. Now, these aren't all stories with happy endings. Unfortunately, Trevor's wife, Patricia, was less successful in her attempts to recover. Her physical injuries were more severe and more painful than her husband's, and her emotional wounds wound up proving insurmountable. After 22 years of trying everything she, her doctors, and her therapists could think of, she wound up taking her own life. That doesn't mean she was weak or less worthy. It just means that the changes to her brain during the attack were more stubborn. Our animal bodies remember that the world can be a dangerous and scary place, and they do their best to make our rational brains aware of that fact. They're just trying to keep us safe. Gonzalez believes this is related to how sensitive Patricia was to, she had this subconscious knowledge. In the hours leading up to the attack, Patricia had a feeling of foreboding. She actually tried several times to convince her husband to turn around. Gonzalez believes she was actually observing subtle signs of the bear's presence, and her primal self knew that they were entering the territory of a dangerous creature. The fact that she ignored those subtle messages may have contributed to the fact that after the attack, she couldn't convince that same subconscious to stand down. Right? You didn't listen to me before, so I'm not going to let you not listen to me ever again. So we have some capacity to use our rational minds to force our bodies to relearn our own strength, both mental and physical. We have some capacity to rewire our brains to associate specific stimulus with more positive feelings, whether it's gratitude or joy or awe. In a way, this is a fake it till you make it strategy. We can force ourselves to feel optimism, excitement, happiness, appreciation, until our brains get back into that habit. As Patricia's story demonstrates, the capacity is not unlimited, but it's there. It's there. So did any of you see the movie 127 Hours with James Franco? So it's a movie about Aaron Ralston. He's a climber. He got his hand stuck between a rock face and a giant boulder, and he had to self-amputate to survive. The movie came out in 2010. I've never actually seen it. I don't think I want to. Just reading the story in black and white was quite enough for me. What got Aaron through this unimaginably horrible experience was the repetitive pattern. He came up with mantras. Sort, pinch, rotate, slice. Sort, pinch, rotate, slice. Or grip, squeeze, twist, tear. He broke the task that he needed to do into small steps and focused on taking just one step at a time. So it was a focus on process, not destination. And there was a rhythm to it. In the aftermath of the incident, he continued to rely on these skills. He would think clearly and plan, set small goals, celebrate his successes, surrender to the process, keep on trying. So echoes of Eileen returning to her practice of running. There may be an evolutionary reason that repetitive acts soothe and steady us after trauma. If you think about the skills needed back when our species were hunter-gatherers, we absolutely needed that ability to go on high alert, but we also needed an ability to do slow, steady work, like grinding nuts and seeds or grain, shaping tools, tanning hides. People for whom those sorts of tasks, doing those sorts of tasks, calm their central nervous system, it allowed them to do a better job than those who remained on high alert. So perhaps it gave them a survival advantage. The good news is the outcome of this repetition doesn't have to be painful. It can be like a scarf or a blanket. Another story Gonzalez shares is of a woman named Anne whose 5-year-old daughter Grace died suddenly and unexpectedly of a severe infection. Losing a child, of course, is one of the most painful experiences there is. To help herself heal, Anne taught herself to knit. I know we have knitters. For Anne, who didn't already know how to knit, she distracted her brain from the pain of the loss by forcing it to learn a new skill, which is another thing we can do. She used her hands to force a sense of order on her mind. And I can testify to the truth of this. After the election, I was really struggling, and all of my tried and tested strategies for self-care weren't cutting it. I was about to make an appointment to see my doctor to ask to be medicated again. And then I started knitting. And it leveled me right out. So in this community, we are blessed to have people who know how to do things like knit and are willing to teach you. The PPQ meets every Monday at 7:30. Don't expect to get a word in edgewise, but they will teach you how to knit. Or hand quilt. The Yarn Underground has knitting groups, and it doesn't have to be knitting. It could be quilting, sewing, wood carving, building furniture. Any organized, rhythmic, pattern activity serves as well.
Thursdays at Cafe Artista from 1 till 2:30. We also have Fran Rodriguez and I there doing crafts.
Okay, so Thursdays, Cafe Artista, 1:30 to 3:30.
1 to 2:30.
1 to 2:30. 1 to 2:30. Thursday, Cafe Artista, 1 to 2:30.
I'll teach you to knit.
Yeah, Marissa will teach you to knit at Cafe Artista. So any organized pattern activity, though, is going to help support our resilience. Don McCall, a veteran who survived a brutal campaign and then a shipwreck, managed his post-traumatic stress by becoming a bricklayer. Gonzalez writes, there was something about the patterned rhythmic mechanics of laying bricks that soothed him. The heft of the hod, the slap of wet mortar, the swinging motion of the trowel, and the block by block building of something tangible, something outside himself that he could stand back and see and say, I built that. The direction, the goal, the organized rhythm of it all served to begin dampening his rage. So particulars don't matter. Any activity with repetitive actions and a creative component will support resilience. You can make collages, you can dip candles, you can sketch. There are other helpful practices like mantra, rhythmic, deep breathing, and you can incorporate those into the activity. Focus on the process, not the result. The nervous system calms down, cortisol levels drop, we rewire our brain, and safety and contentment become our steady state again. Gonzalez highlights 3 other practices that have helped survivors remain resilient. Gardening, any gardeners? Writing, and getting lost. So gardening, creative act, has a repetitive function, like knitting or using a mantra, planting seeds, pulling weeds, picking fruit and veggies. These are activities that require that narrowness of focus on the process. And there's something about digging in the dirt that's just so deeply satisfying in that tactile way, and it affirms the capacity of life to flourish and to grow. As for writing, in addition to having that creative component and the repetitive and tactile stimulation, Gonzalez points out that it allows us to reorder our memories and redefine ourselves. So several of the survivors that he wrote about were writers. As we tell our stories, we give shape to who we are, who we were, and who we're becoming. Trauma disrupts our self-concept, and writing allows us to reconstruct it. And then there's my favorite one, especially after sabbatical, getting lost. Gonzalez describes a woman named Kathy who, in the wake of a terrible illness, couldn't find her footing, so she packed up her life and went to India to learn Hindi. Travel, Gonzalez writes, forces the unconscious reorganization of a number of areas of the brain especially those involving the hippocampus, which has the special function of creating spatial maps. Every time we travel to an unfamiliar environment, our brain undergoes an important transformation. Now, we can't all uproot ourselves and go to a different continent, but just exploring a new neighborhood or a new hiking trail serves the same purpose. So, one last story. A woman named Lizette endured decades of emotional and verbal abuse and then finally decided to leave her husband. His response was to shoot her and then himself. Her journey to emotional health included many of the practices I've already talked about, but it both began and ended with the desire to help others. In the immediate aftermath, what kept her alive and moving was the need to care for her children. Next, she began speaking to police officers about her experience, helping them understand the phenomenon of abuse. And then she met a family whose experience was even worse than her own. On top of the attempted murder and successful suicide, one of the children was shot and survived, while another was forced to watch and participate in the process. She became their hero. She became their caretaker, taking them to all of their appointments while their mother was unable to drive. Gonzalez writes, Lizette became a rescuer, and she left behind the personality of the victim. Helping others is one of the most therapeutic steps you can take. Now, I'm not a fan of comparative suffering, but the truth is that you can always find people who have it worse than you are, or people who are going through something you've already come through. The act of reaching out reminds us that we have gifts to give and resources to share. One of the reasons in my life that I've occasionally struggled with depression and anxiety is that I was raped when I was 15. The single most helpful choice I made in dealing with that trauma was training to become a rape crisis counselor. Learning how to help and support other people normalized all of the ways that I myself needed help and support. And then offering that help and support, actually offering it, that was transformative. There's this movement from victim to survivor, and then from survivor to helper and guide. And I think this movement lies at the heart of leading a resilient life. So, to review, in addition to our foundational resilience practice of slow, deep breathing, we can try creative aggression, getting mad and channeling our frustration into meeting new challenges, reconditioning our responses to stimuli, suppression, humor, repetitive rhythmic activities that require us to focus close in, like knitting, bricklaying, other arts and crafts, gardening, writing, getting lost, and finding other people to help and support. In all of this, we can trust our inner wisdom. When we're able to look at the fullness of the challenge we're facing, there's a part of us that does know what we need. Our spirit is almost endlessly resilient, and it will show us the way to recondition our brain and our body. Trauma changes us. Resilience doesn't mean bouncing back. It means accepting who we are, claiming a new wholeness. Challenging experience become gateways, platforms for growth and transformation. And you know, it is hard being human. I've said that before. I'll say it again. Terrible, horrible, no good, very bad things happen to us, no matter who we are, what we do, or where we live. But you know what? With patience, time, self-compassion, awareness, and a healthy dose of love, we almost always find our way. We're almost always able to lead a life infused with joy, satisfaction, and peace. So be it, and so may it be.